We are in 68 AD. Nero, 30 years old then, inaugurates one of the flagship projects of his reign, his imperial palace, a monumental construction that primarily reveals the extraordinary personality of the Roman emperor.
Nero is an aesthete. He is fascinated and passionate about art.
Everything must be up to what he considers the best. And it makes sense for him to build a palace that represents his personal grandeur.
It is also a message that the emperor sends. Rome is the center of the world, and in its center rules a man. It is the emperor. It is Nero.
The most powerful man in the empire has been overseeing this vast construction site for nearly 4 years, which he will name the Golden House. But unlike its name, the property is much more than just a house.
It is a large complex, built over 80 hectares, which includes an imperial palace, but also an artificial lake, a private theatre, artificial mountains, forests, fields, vineyards. Nero has the crazy plan to include in this palace everything that the world contains.
The Domus Aurea, meaning the Golden House in Latin, is a small condensation of the cosmos. We can find there all the most precious materials of the universe. There is gold in decoration almost everywhere, of course. That's why it's called the Golden House, but also because it echoes the sun and its golden rays. There are rooms entirely decorated with marble, mosaics, and exceptional paintings. Basically, this palatial complex contains all that Roman architecture has to offer at its best.
Nero brings to Rome works that he particularly loves. Works from the Greek world, sculptures, statuary groups, such as the Laocoon with his sons, which can still be seen in Rome today.
Nowadays, the vast majority of the palace has disappeared, but under these thermae of the antiquity, archaeologists have discovered some remains that reveal the splendors of the era.
In this part of the palace, the remains of 30,000 square meters of decorations and stuccos are preserved. The ornamentation of this room is certainly the most extraordinary of the Domus Aurea. In this room dedicated to the nymphs, we can see a scene of Ulysses and Polyphemus on the ceiling. This mosaic is made up of small colored tiles. It is one of the oldest, if not the oldest mosaic in the world. It depicts a famous scene from Homer's Odyssey, where Ulysses offers the Cyclops Polyphemus a cup of wine to annoy him. This palace is one of the most impressive of its time. It will influence in the following centuries both Roman and Byzantine architecture, or even Islamic architecture.
This architectural revolution doesn't stop there. Nero is truly passionate about Roman engineering, and thanks to the major innovations of the time, he can dazzle his visitors on a very large scale. He envisions a rotating dining room. This three-dimensional animation made in 2015 shows us how it worked. Located high up in the palace, it offered Nero's guests an exceptional view of all of Rome.
The dining room stood above a ground level, which alone is preserved today. This ground level has the appearance of an enormous tower, measuring 20 meters high and 27 in diameter. The whole thing measured about 32.5 meters.
At the top of this structure, Nero seats his guests on a platform of an estimated width of 12 meters. This platform spins thanks to a clever ball-bearing system located underneath the floor.
The rotation of the dining room floor was ensured by a water wheel. The water powered the water wheel that transmitted the force needed to rotate the floor at a regular pace.
Let's imagine the effect it can have on those people who have the exceptional honor of dining at the imperial table and who somehow see the landscape slowly changing. But that's not enough. Towering over the entire ensemble, there is a colossus, close to 35 meters high.
Nero is depicted naked like the sun god, with sun rays emerging from his hair.
There is a desire to show that he dominates the city, both physically and intellectually, like a god.
The problem for the Romans, especially for the Roman elite attached to Roman traditions, is that Nero overdoes it. He steps outside the normal framework of his role. He does not respect the rules.
The Roman world is a world governed by very strict rules. It is a world where austerity, severity, and gravity are supreme values.
Nero is eccentric. He has a strong taste for modernity and is something of a nonconformist. He hates conforming to the practices of Roman society. Anything that marks his originality is something positive for him.
Nero was certainly one of the most criticized, most reviled, most scorned, most hated emperors in the entire history of imperial Rome, of ancient Rome.
In the collective imagination today, Nero is the emperor of all excesses. He is a megalomaniac, he is perverse, he is hypersexual. He has an extremely harmful representation.
While Nero's monstrous character is well known, what do we know about his appearance? Does it reflect the terrible persona?
Nero is a handsome boy. He's about 5 feet 6 tall, quite stocky, quite sturdy.
He has very pale skin, freckles, and when he gets upset, he turns red.
He sometimes has a sort of beard collar, which is undoubtedly of Greek influence. He certainly wants to manifest his Hellenism, and he has eyes between blue, green, and grey. And we know that he was nearsighted.
It is said that he used an emerald that served him somewhat as a magnifying glass. But because he squinted to look at things, it gave him a rather strange appearance, distorted his face, and many people found him absolutely frightening when he did that.
This frightening gaze will not be the only peculiarity that will confuse his contemporaries. Over the course of his reign, Nero changes and increasingly displays with pride his love for art.
He dresses in a kind of robe, ties a scarf around his neck. He is barefoot. Actually, he gives himself a look that we might almost call today bohemian chic, precisely to shock people and to say, I am not just an emperor, I am an artist.
An emperor who was an artist and aesthete, here is surely the much more complex personality of this figure, whose cruelty has long been the only aspect remembered.
We are here in Antium, one of the most beautiful seaside resorts of the antiquity. And the most beautiful villa on the coast belonged to the Julia family, the imperial dynasty. It's here that Agrippina decided to spend the end of her pregnancy away from the turmoil of Rome to give birth to her little Nero. It is December 15th, 37. Agrippina has already been in labour for several hours. It is an extremely difficult childbirth. But finally, at dawn, as the sun rises, she finally gives birth to her son. And the sun's rays touch the baby before even touching the ground. For her, it's a clear sign. The gods have chosen her son to become emperor.
However, The destiny of this child, who is not yet called Nero but Lucius, already seems divided between good and evil, for his birth is also surrounded by ominous omens.
Agrippina quickly consults after the birth of Nero some magi, priests from the east, and she asks them if her son will become emperor and if he will reign one day. The magi reply to her,
"This child will reign, but he will kill his mother." And Agrippina said, "Let him kill me as long as he reigns."
Agrippina has every reason to be ambitious for her son. He is, just like her, a direct descendant of Augustus, who founded the Roman Empire 60 years earlier. To better understand how imperial power is passed on, we must visit the Capitoline Museum in Rome. One of the halls of this museum offers an impressive life-sized genealogy of the Roman emperors.
We are here in the Hall of Emperors, where 500 years of history look down on us. We can see all the busts of the Roman emperors from Augustus, who founded the empire in 27 BC, to the last emperors of the 5th century AD. And we obviously see 2 busts of Nero, with whom the Julio-Claudian dynasty ends.
The Julio-Claudian dynasty, founded by Augustus, is the first family to have ruled the Roman Empire after Julius Caesar.
The Roman Empire must not resemble a kingdom. Normally, power is not passed from father to son, and yet Augustus, with great audacity, will choose his own successors, the future Augustus, and power will thus be transmitted within this Julio-Claudian family, through family members, sometimes nephews, sometimes adopted sons, sometimes sons-in-law, until the arrival of Nero, almost a century later.
Augustus, great-nephew of Julius Caesar, thus passed his power to his adoptive son, Tiberius. Caligula succeeded him, followed by Claudius, then Nero.
In this room, we can see several members of the Julio-Claudian family, among whom are Emperor Tiberius, the second emperor of Rome, but also Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder, the grandparents of Nero. Germanicus was never an emperor, but he was one of the greatest Roman generals, and Nero can also claim his prestige.
However, Nero is not destined to rule. Although a direct descendant of Augustus through his mother, his paternal lineage does not immediately allow him to claim the imperial title.
Nero's father, Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, belongs to a great Roman aristocratic family, a great family of the elite, but he is relatively vulgar and violent.
He amuses himself on the Appian Way by charging with his chariot at the children playing on the pavement to kill them.
It is also said that during an argument in the forum with another senator, he pulled the man's eye out. So he is a man who resorts to violence very, very easily.
So he wasn't a very good example as a father.
A violent father whom Nero will barely know. He dies when Nero is only 3 years old. At the same time, Emperor Caligula accuses Agrippina, his sister, of plotting against him and condemns her to exile.
What to do with little Nero, if not to entrust him to an aunt, Domitia, who will, come what may, raise the child?
She's a very liberated woman for the time, spending her days organising parties in a rather joyful but slightly decadent atmosphere. She has him raised by a barber, by a dancer. Basically, all the people who want to be part of educating little Nero participate, and will impart to him a taste for partying, art and excess.
But this bohemian life is short-lived. When Emperor Caligula is assassinated at the age of 28 by his own guard, his successor, Claudius, allows Agrippina to return to Rome. She then decides to take things in charge and to give her son an education worthy of a future emperor.
She will raise her son to make him the expression of her own power. She loves Nero, but she doesn't love him like a mother. She loves him like an object.
Obviously, Agrippina was absolutely not a maternal or nurturing person. We cannot imagine for a second Agrippina holding on her lap the little Lucius Domitius and tickling him. This is absolutely impossible to imagine.
On the other hand, she is a mother who tells her son that he is the heir of Augustus's dynasty, that he is the most important man on earth, and that one day he will rule. She builds him an oversized ego, but there is no room for maternal love in it.
Agrippina chooses as his tutor one of the most influential figures of the early empire, Seneca, a senator and shrewd businessman, but above all a writer and philosopher.
Seneca is a great Stoic philosopher, even one of the greatest. Stoicism is a philosophy of Greek origin, but it will achieve great success in Rome.
It is a philosophy that asks people to live in a just and balanced way, without any excess.
Seneca will therefore explain to Nero what an enlightened emperor is. And he tries to show him that clemency is the main quality of the emperor, of the princeps, and that cruelty is a sign of weakness.
And if Seneca's philosophy continues to inspire us today, it is because his principles are universal. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, every princely library had to contain a work by the famous ancient philosopher. At the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, a precious copy of the Moral Letters to Lucilius is preserved. It's a collection of letters between Seneca and a Roman governor.
We have here the frontispiece of the manuscript, sumptuously illuminated. We are in front of a manuscript typical of the great bibliophilia of the late Middle Ages, extremely luxurious, with many colors and gold illuminations. And what is extremely interesting is that in the main miniature, in the background, we have Seneca. So of course, it's an imaginary portrait. He is represented as authors were depicted at work in the 15th century, on his chair, writing. One of the reasons why this text is so widely read at the end of the Middle Ages and so frequently copied is also because it raises important questions for Christians about the place of death, the justification of this death, the justification of suicide, which is a fundamental question that is incomprehensible for a Christian. It raises the question of vice and virtues, the question of how a man, a scholar, behaves in relation to the world and in relation to adversity.
Seneca dreams of making Nero a good prince. For this, he also teaches him the main discipline among Roman aristocrats, rhetoric.
Rhetoric is not only the art of speaking, but the art of convincing. It's a true science.
It is by writing and delivering speeches that men gain power in Rome.
So, Nero has excellent training in rhetoric, philosophy, but in addition, perhaps unlike others, he has artistic training. One might even say that in a way, he is a complete man.
Agrippina persuades her uncle, Emperor Claudius, to marry her.
Claudius finds himself a widower, and he needs a prestigious empress by his side. So, why not a woman from his family who shares his origins?
But it is not possible. Agrippina is his niece, and the law forbids it. There are laws regulating incest in Rome at that time. So Claudius decides to change the law.
And thus Agrippina, the niece of Claudius, becomes the wife of Claudius, and then Augusta, for she becomes empress.
But Agrippina's plan doesn't stop there. Now her son must surpass Claudius's son, the young Britannicus.
For the second part of her plan, she urges her husband Claudius to adopt the young Nero.
And it is thus that Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus will become Nero. It is during this adoption process by Emperor Claudius that he changes his name.
He becomes the direct heir of Emperor Claudius. and even the first in the line of succession, since he is older than Britannicus.
Nero now only has to reach adulthood, which will happen at the age of 14.
Normally, adulthood is at the age of 17, but not for Nero. A ceremony is organized. Nero takes off his child garment, his toga praetexta, and puts on the toga virilis, which is the garment of Roman citizens, of adults.
For the young Nero, the moment is solemn. Wearing this traditional garment now makes him a full-fledged citizen.
The toga is the costume, more precisely the symbolic cloak of a Roman citizen. The slave will not wear a toga, nor will the foreigner. It is a cloak that is 9 meters long, so very, very long, and obviously very complex to arrange. You couldn't put it on by yourself. So a slave who was accustomed to this ceremonial was definitely needed, since it would take a very long time to put on a toga perfectly with the folds that give exactly all this elegance to the costume. This toga makes Nero not only a citizen, but someone worthy of leading the state, and to do so in the Roman tradition.
While everything is in place for Nero to succeed Claudius, Agrippina is worried. Claudius seems to have seen through her scheme.
Claudius made comments that disturbed her a bit. He said he has no luck with women, but he knows how to punish them. Agrippina fears that Claudius changes his mind about the succession.
But she cannot let him overthrow all her hopes. So she will decide to assassinate him.
We know about Claudius's gluttonous appetite and his adoration for mushrooms. During a banquet, a dish of mushrooms is brought out. Claudius rushes, starts eating them, and becomes ill.
They call in Claudius's doctor, who sticks a feather down his throat to make him vomit. Except that the doctor might be Agrippina's accomplice, and it might be the feather that's poisoned. In any case, Claudius is in agony. He dies during the night.
Agrippina is about to see her son come to power, and to ensure this, she keeps Claudius's children in the palace, at their father's side.
When Nero appears and the death of Claudius is announced, there must be no dispute, neither military nor political. That is what will happen.
Nero will deliver a speech, certainly written by Seneca, and will be acclaimed by the Praetorian Guard. In Rome, being acclaimed by the Praetorian Guard is equivalent to being named emperor.
The emperor needs the support of this elite army unit, as it is responsible for ensuring his safety. The second step of his inauguration involves delivering a speech before the senators, who grant him all powers and honors. The young Nero, on the brink of his 17th year, is now the most powerful man in the entire Roman Empire.
When Nero returns to the palace, the Imperial Guard comes to him and asks for the first time the password for the night rounds. And Nero says, Optima Mater, the best mother, because he knows that he owes his rise, on this very special day of October 54, to one person. It is the work of his mother.
At the time of Nero's ascension, the Roman Empire stretches all around the Mediterranean Sea and forms a civilization of more than 50 million people.
At 17, Nero is not really ready to rule this absolutely gigantic empire. And Agrippina, his mother, knows this well. She will take advantage of the situation to become the regent. This status does not exist in the antiquity. She invents it without naming it, but she is the one who actually rules.
An unprecedented status that allows Agrippina to play a crucial political role, or almost, because the highest Roman assembly, the Senate, does not recognize her authority.
The problem is that the Curia, the seat of the Roman senators, is forbidden to women. But this is not an issue. She will find a workaround. She will request that the sessions of the Curia be held in the imperial palace.
And she is hidden behind a curtain, whispering to her son the answers he should give. Nero is, in fact, completely annihilated by his mother.
If Nero lets Agrippina handle a large part of political matters, in the Roman tradition, this responsibility is unusual for the mother of the family, also called the matron.
The Roman matron does not have fundamentally political power. She is a woman who must marry well, a woman who must raise her children well, make them responsible citizens, and under no circumstance should she govern. It is the man who governs.
This new female power annoys, especially the two closest advisors of Nero, Seneca, his former tutor, and Burrus, the commanding officer of the Praetorian Guard. These two men will quickly want to get rid of the fearless Agrippina.
So, Agrippina and the Seneca-Burrus clan begin to stare stonily at each other, and it's clear that there will be a conflict, and that this conflict can only be a fight to the death.
Seneca will consider that to fight a woman, another woman is needed. And to reduce Agrippina's influence, he will put another young girl in Nero's path. Her name is Acte. She is freed slave. She revolves in the imperial milieu and knows very well how it all works. She's extremely beautiful, gentle, caressing, and under Seneca's control. So she will do everything he tells her.
Nero is immediately captivated, especially since Roman customs allow this former slave to offer the emperor a very liberated sexuality.
With a freed woman like Acte, anything is possible. All the positions, all the caresses, all the kisses are allowed. And so, in the arms of Acte, Nero fully discovers a playful sexuality dedicated to pleasure.
Of course, Agrippina hates Acte. She sees very clearly that in Acte's arms, her son is becoming a man. Therefore, a danger for her.
Obviously, she does not like the idea at all that this child, whom she shaped for 17 years to be the object of her power, is slipping away from her. She does not know what to do and becomes very erratic.
Agrippina gets angry. She threatens Nero, tells him that it's thanks to her that he's emperor. She is a maker of emperors, and therefore she can very well undo what she has done.
She pretends to get closer to Britannicus to scare her son.
Britannicus, he too, could have been emperor. He is indeed 4 years younger than Nero, but he is the legitimate descendant of Claudius.
He has many supporters in Rome, and many want Britannicus to rule, and consequently Agrippina thinks she can set Britannicus against Nero.
The young Britannicus, only 14 years old, would thus become a real threat to Nero, whom he would need to eliminate. And according to ancient sources, it is during a banquet in February 55 AD that a providential event for Nero occurs.
Britannicus asked a slave for hot water. The slave brought it to him, and finding it too hot, Britannicus requested another glass of water to cool his drink.
And at the moment when the young prince drank, he writhed in pain on the ground and expired seconds later.
It's a real theater scene. The less wise of the courtiers flee. The more astute, observe the different reactions. They see that Agrippine is pale as a sheet, indicating she is not involved, and they mainly watch Nero.
And Nero said, "No, no, do not touch him. He is having an epileptic seizure," something already known at the time and called the high evil. So, he will regain consciousness, don't touch him. But the prince is dead.
Now, what exactly happened? We will never know. There is a political logic suggesting that, indeed, Nero made his main and only rival disappear like that.
This scene has puzzled historians since antiquity. What did Britannicus die of? Was it really an epileptic seizure that proved fatal? Or did he die from poisoning orchestrated by Nero? At the National Museum of Natural History, they preserve the herbariums of the most feared poisonous plants of the time.
First, here we have hemlock, a very famous plant used for eliminating high-ranking figures at court. We also have Hyoscyamus, and here belladonna and colchicum, which can be found quite easily in the European countryside. Hemlock was rather unique because it is mainly the seeds that, in small amounts, just 4 or 5 grams, are enough to be a lethal poison after several hours. It starts with a sort of numbness that moves from the lower body upwards, and it ends with asphyxiation.
This long and painful death is not the one described by ancient historians. During this banquet, Britannicus is said to have succumbed almost instantly.
Mixing a poison with water, whether the water was hot or cold, would likely diminish its potency and toxicity. Anyway, in the 1st century AD, cyanide was not available. Therefore, there was no equivalent of a poison that could cause death within a few minutes. So, the hypothesis to consider is probably that of an epileptic seizure.
If we may never know the truth, one thing is certain. Nero's most important rival disappears just in time. Weary of his mother's terrible Machiavellianism, the emperor orders Agrippina to leave the imperial palace. He now wants to be the sole master of the Roman Empire.
Poppaea enters Nero's life like a hurricane. Nero had already known love and sexuality with Acte, but here he truly discovers passion.
She is a young aristocrat of Pompeian origin, from an extremely wealthy and powerful family.
Nero is madly in love with Poppaea, literally spellbound by her beauty, intelligence, and charm.
Poppaea further cultivates her myth of beauty by hiding her face behind a veil, an appearance that can be imagined thanks to a statue kept at the Capitoline Museum in Rome.
Behind me, we can see a statue of a woman representing modesty. In Rome, in the 2nd and 1st century before Jesus Christ, it was a concept that was deified. Modesty is a value that women must embrace. So, one can imagine that the women who went out in Rome around the beginning of the empire must have looked like this. They wore a cloak, a palla, which they wrapped around themselves and draped over their hair. But by the time of Nero, this way of dressing was already quite outdated. Women showed more of their hair, even if they attached a part of their pallor to their bun. Poppaea knows she is very beautiful, and she will use her beauty to impress people, which makes her the only Roman woman to completely veil herself when she's going out. In reality, she's not trying to express modesty, but when we see a veiled woman crossing Rome, everyone knows it's Poppaea, and it creates a sort of mystery around her. When she arrives somewhere at an evening event, she waits for everyone to look at her before she can unveil herself and amaze them with her beauty.
If Poppaea is stunningly beautiful, she is also a very ambitious woman. And just being the emperor's mistress is no longer enough for her. She wants to become Nero's wife, even against the life of the empress mother.
It goes without saying that Agrippina perfectly understood the danger, since Poppaea is, in the eyes of the empress, a rival far more important than Acte was. And Agrippina does everything in her power to keep Nero in his official marriage with Claudius's daughter, with Octavia.
Octavia is the wife who was imposed on him for dynastic reasons.
Nero dreams of divorcing Octavia. It's his dream, and he doesn't even hide it. He doesn't love Octavia. He finds her dull, uninteresting. He wants a marriage of love, a flamboyant marriage with a woman who resembles him.
A desire, however, impossible, as long as the Empress Mother uses the unfortunate Octavia as a tool for blackmail to regain her privileges. Even far from the court, her angers terrify the young 21-year-old emperor. Nero understands that Agrippina is still a serious threat to him. He begins to contemplate the unthinkable, eliminating his own mother.
One evening in March 59, he invites his mother to dinner in the Bay of Naples for the Minerva festivities in Baiae. There, publicly, he reconciles with her. Everyone sees them laughing together, hugging. Everyone thinks it's the end of the war between them.
A reconciliation more illusory than real. For that very evening, as his mother returned home, Nero accused her of attempting to assassinate him and sent men to commit the unforgivable crime.
And at that moment, it seems she said, and this might be like her, to the man who was about to kill her, "Strike in the belly where I carried this monster."
The Empress Mother dies at the age of 43.
Legend has it that Nero felt the need to go and see his mother's death for himself, and at that moment, he said that despite her age, she had kept all her beauty.
If matricide is unforgivable in the eyes of Roman society, this one will remain unpunished. This immunity gave Nero a sense of full power. From now on, nothing can oppose him, starting with the young Octavia.
Nero and Poppaea will do everything to achieve their ends. For this, Nero will first accuse Octavia of infertility. The couple has been married for 8 years and still haven't had children. She will be sent to a distant province. But the people will consider that the emperor treats her unfairly. So he demands her return to Rome.
Nero decides to eliminate her, to have Octavia killed. The pretext is easily found. She is accused of adultery.
A false accusation, of course, but fatal for the unfortunate Octavia, who will be condemned to death. Nero finally marries his favorite. Poppaea is now the one and only empress. In January 63, the young couple stays in Antium, in one of the emperor's villas, of which only these few remains exist today.
It is here in Antium that one of the happiest events in Nero's life will take place. It is here that Poppaea will give birth to their daughter, Claudia Augusta. One might imagine that for Nero, having a daughter would be a non-event, but not at all. He is extremely happy. He will hold a whole series of celebrations in Rome to celebrate the birth of his daughter. And above all, he will give his daughter the name Claudia Augusta. And that is no small matter, because the name Augusta was, until then, reserved for the mothers and wives of emperors. It is the first time a princess will have this name, which also shows that Nero intended to make her his heir in a certain way.
Unfortunately, the immense joy will be short-lived. The little princess dies prematurely at the age of 4 months.
And just as he was delirious with joy, now he is delirious with sorrow. For him, it's a dreadful tragedy. It also says a lot about Nero's sensitivity. He is a father too. And it's the paradox of this man who had his mother assassinated and who weeps over the death of his daughter.
And fate seems to be relentless with Nero. 2 years later, while Poppaea is once again pregnant, it is the young empress who dies.
Nero is absolutely devastated by the death of his wife. Normally, when a person dies, they are cremated to collect their ashes and then bury them. However, he finds her so beautiful that he will request that her body be embalmed in order to preserve her physical beauty.
And Nero had her taken to the mausoleum of Augustus, truly the Holy of Holies of this Julio-Claudian imperial family. It's a way to show all the love, but also all the respect owed to the deceased empress. It's a very beautiful lesson of love, in a way, that he addresses to the empire.
Nero will not remain alone for the rest of his life. He marries a 3rd time, but fate will decree that he never has any descendants.
Nero's first years in power are marked by being a good prince.
He is young, he is handsome, he is enthusiastic, and he is appreciated by everyone.
It's nearly a flawless path for Nero.
Always guided by Seneca, Nero acted during the first 5 years of his reign as a moderate emperor. He maintained his relationships with the Senate and showed clemency.
His advisors will do everything to ensure that Nero is a good emperor and does not follow the examples of previous emperors like Caligula, who left a deplorable image to the Roman people. For instance, he will prohibit a certain number of violent practices in Rome.
When he is asked to sign a death warrant for a condemned man, he says, "Ah, if only I did not know how to write." So, he has respect, I would say, as astonishing and paradoxical as it may seem, for human life.
Nero also shows concern for the well-being of the Roman people. He increases measures in favor of his subjects.
For example, he builds a vast 2-story shopping centre where the people can stock up on supplies. He also constructs thermae, so public baths, and various sports and gymnastics halls for the people.
To complete the system, Nero wishes to improve the water distribution network. At the time, The city is already crossed by 9 aqueducts, but the new emperor wants to make his contribution.
Behind me, you can see the remains of the Aqua Claudia. It is the aqueduct constructed by Emperor Claudius and inaugurated in the 50s AD. But Nero also wants to contribute to the city's comfort by extending Claudius's aqueduct to supply other parts of the city of Rome with this water. The Romans are very large consumers of water. It is important to imagine that there were fountains everywhere in the city. At the end of the empire, there were 1,300 of them. But it is not only the fountains that consume water, there are also the thermae. And they are everywhere in the city of Rome because everyone goes to the thermae. It is the great moment of conviviality to which all Romans participate. And in the thermae, indeed, there are steam baths, but there are also sometimes pools, and the water flows constantly all day, so much so that the Romans consume about 500 litres of water per person each day, while today, an average Western people consumes about 140 litres.
In Rome, the citizen's standard of living largely depends on the emperor's generosity, as work is far from being a priority.
In a year of 365 days, I think you must have something like 200 or 250 holidays, if I'm not mistaken. So who's working? Basically, just the slaves.
Slaves, this important workforce of the empire, mainly come from Roman conquests. Their status as captives is then passed on from generation to generation through the mother to remain enslaved to their master. But Nero, like his predecessors, wants to satisfy his people, all his people.
He offers to his people bread and games, panem et circenses, as a Latin poet aptly writes.
It's as if you had every day all the cinemas for free, and at the same time every day a meal that is given to you. Basically, everything is free.
Nero is even more inclined to please his people because he shares with them the same passion for games. In Rome's Circus Maximus, every day there are hundreds of thousands of spectators cheering on the gladiators or chariot racing. Even today, there are enthusiasts of these circus games. They even continue to practice them. And today, they came to train in the arenas of Nimes.
Come on, speed up a little, Valerie. Please, at a gallop.
Andrew Ruiz reconstructed this ancient chariot himself. He realized how dangerous it was to drive.
The difficulty is mainly in the balance. If she straightens up, if she stiffens at a full gallop, she is thrown from the chariot. When there was a collision, the chariots were so light, so fragile that they would break apart. There were many accidents, and of course there were fatalities because the chariots coming from behind couldn't be stopped and the charioteers were crushed.
The charioteers, that's what the chariot drivers are called, were slaves who became stars in antiquity.
The life of the charioteers was a golden life for them since they earned a lot of money, they had their villa, they had their servant. Well, it was a golden life, but they remained slaves.
Nero, a great fan of chariot races, takes advantage of these events to show his love for his people.
He is a man of proximity, at least during the first 5, 6, or 7 years of his reign. He is there, he is among his people.
He walks through the streets. He likes shaking hands. He likes being greeted.
He even manages to establish, through his entertainment policy, a kind of symbiosis with his people. And then, what's very original and very new, is that the people are not just spectators. He encourages the public to become actors in these games. Nero himself sets the example by entering the arena and putting on a show.
The Emperor's specialty is singing. Over the years, he will devote more and more time to it.
He trains every day to sing. Nero is not an amateur. No, he trains every day.
He puts lead plates on his stomach and tries to do what all singers do today: vocal exercises.
It is said that he took emetics, enemas, that he avoided certain foods that could irritate his voice.
It is even said that he saves his voice. He reserves it solely for singing performances. He gives up delivering the speeches that emperors traditionally addressed to their troops.
Singing, but also poetry, and the cithara. The emperor has a passion for all these artistic disciplines. In ancient Rome, these shows are performed not in circuses, but in theaters. The Theater of Orange, with its immense stage wall still partially decorated, is one of the best preserved in the world.
You had more than 76 columns that adorned the entire wall on several levels. And behind these colonnades, there was a multicolored marble coating that further embellished this monument, which must have been absolutely magnificent.
A team of archaeologists from the Sorbonne was able to reconstruct the theater as it was in the 1st century. Capable of accommodating up to 10,000 people, it was then equipped with an awning, those red sails that allowed the audience to protect themselves from the sun and intense heat. As for the stage wall, it was not just a decorative element.
So here, we are precisely between the two walls that make up the stage wall. It's the space that served as backstage for the Roman theater performances. On the ground floor, you had the actors' dressing rooms. And here, we are on the 1st floor, which probably served as a storage area. You see, this kind of opening was used to either bring out a machine, a set piece, or even actors who could appear through theatrical machinery. By the way, that's where the expression Deus ex machina comes from, as they would make the gods appear through the use of machines. And that's where everything happened.
This stage wall, 37 meters high, also plays a role in the acoustics of the place.
There was no sound amplification in the Roman era, so the sound was reflected by the wall towards the stands, and then thanks to the wooden roof with a 15-meter overhang that also helped reflect the sound towards the stands. Overall, they were really impressive and technically advanced constructions.
Not content with performing in the theater, Nero also wants to ensure the public's enthusiasm. To achieve this, he will invent the Augustiani.
The Augustiani, it's 5,000 young men and women who are meant to do what we would call cheering today, meaning that wherever he performs, they applaud him frantically.
Nero is someone who needs ovations. He is someone who is not confident and always seeks success from others.
Intoxicated by the public's applause, Nero will become increasingly absorbed by his passion for theatre, to the point of pushing his imperial duties to the background.
Gradually, Nero will literally theatricalize his role. When he comes to the emperor's morning greeting, he appears more and more often in a dressing gown, like an actor. He progressively loses his grip on reality. The imperial role is very staid, and that doesn't interest him at all. Everything is play, everything is pleasure, everything is staged.
And while the people are entertained by the emperor's extravagances, they are not to the taste of the Roman aristocracy at all.
In Roman tradition, actors are people of low status, and the arena, it's the place of the ex-convicts.
Never would Julius Caesar or Augustus have entered the arena and put on a show under the gaze of the people. That is intolerable, unacceptable for the Roman aristocracy. It is considered equivalent to prostitution.
Disappointed by such ingratitude, Nero would like to perform before an audience more appreciative of his talent.
And so he thinks that if there's one country where art is truly honored, it's Greece.
He certainly idealized Greece a little, and is looking there for a sort of ideal land for artists.
Greece is a province of the Roman Empire. It was conquered by the Romans in the 2nd century BC.
But this conquest is only military. On the cultural level, Greece wins. It will indeed flood the Roman Empire with its culture.
The best tutors, the greatest intellectuals, the finest slaves come from Greece. So, it's somewhat the most beautiful province that belongs to the Roman Empire.
Shaped by the Hellenic culture, Nero therefore organizes in Greece an artistic tour lasting several months. Among the essential stops of this journey is Delphi, a sanctuary located at the foot of Mount Parnassus. Long considered the center of the ancient world, it is today one of the most impressive archaeological sites in Greece.
When Nero comes to Delphi, you have to imagine that he visits a sanctuary that is still standing, populated with buildings, statues, offerings,